Welcome. I'm Steve Barg, City Administrator for the City of Marshfield, and this is our post-council meeting news conference. We do this after every meeting of the Common Council. In this case, it'll be for the meeting that was held on Tuesday, September 13th. And I'm joined today by Mike Warren, representing the Hub City Times. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And lead away.
All right. Well, in past programs, I've just started at the beginning, and we kind of went right through the agenda. This time, I'd like to start at the end, if I may, because that's sort of where the headline for this meeting is. There was a closed session, and coming out of that closed session, there was, I think there were 2 action items, if I'm remembering correctly. The one got my attention, and I got to check my notes here, but there was a motion to approve a developer's agreement, I believe, with Malls for You, regarding development agreement for project in TIF District 7. That's the, as we all know, a lot of us here know it as the Northway Mall property.
Correct.
So maybe just talk about, we've talked about this is kind of an ongoing thing. They want to redevelop that property. Can you just talk about, coming out of closed session, what the motion was? Maybe you could put some meat on the bone, what is in the developer's agreement and where this thing is at right now.
Yeah, Mike, we finally hit the finish line from the city's perspective. It's been a long road. It's been a good road. We've had good conversations with Ned Brickman from Midland Management, who's been the developer we've worked with on this project. And again, I think that there's a great excitement and buzz in the community to see these new retailers come to pass. In fact, just to name them again, I think they've been noted now by a lot of people. It's kind of leaked out. But Hobby Lobby, Ross, Planet Fitness, Five Below, these are going to be a big benefit to the community in terms of shopping and retail opportunities here in our community. Hopefully, people will want to stay here more on the weekends. We want to see people be able to do their shopping here. Then they'll buy gas here. They'll go to restaurants here. They'll go to other stores, and that's what we want to see. So anyway, the project is about $14 million total, is what the developer has represented. The city's portion is a $1.7 million, what's called an MRO, Municipal Revenue Obligation Note. This is effectively pay-as-you-go TIF, and I don't know that we've really been in those waters before, but we want to move in that direction anyway. So what will happen here is we don't give the developer any money up front whatsoever, but as he creates increment, and he's pledged to get the value of the mall property from, right now it's between $5 and $6 million, I believe, up to $14 million eventually with these improvements and the new stores and everything. As he creates new increment, we would then be remitting 85% of the added increment created by this project back to him and keeping the other 15% for the city until at some point, many years down the road, we will have hit that $1.7 million mark. If we get to the end of the time period, which is roughly 20 years, and he hasn't created that much increment, then that will be the end of it. He won't get the full $1.7 million benefit. But it's almost like sales on commission, if you want to think of it that way. He only gets money remitted back to him if this all comes to pass the way it's expected to. So, it presents very little risk to the city, but a lot of opportunity in terms of growth and development in the mall.
Are there certain dates or, timeline of any kind in terms of you got to be at this, what are the benchmarks? Are there, be at this benchmark by this date, and then we pay? Are there things like that in the developer's agreement?
Well, there really aren't that specific of the kind of dates you're looking for, because again, it's not the typical thing where we're giving you money, and how soon are you doing this? Well, if it takes a little bit longer to get off the ground, he won't have created the tax base. He won't be getting anything back from us. So it's really kind of a little bit more open that way. But the intent, I think, is to begin construction yet this fall with a completion sometime, by I think he said once late spring, hopefully, of 2023. I might be wrong on that. Things have backed up a little bit with trying to get through the process here. But he's also been pulling together his private financing to go along with our piece of it. And now I think our piece is kind of, the end, and they're ready to go. They're excited. So I would expect to see a lot happening over the winter and into next spring on that property.
Yeah, and again, I think it's one of those projects that has some, I don't know, is demolition the right word? I know he wants to kind of reconfigure that property to make each of these spaces sort of standalone properties, similar to what we've seen, we see it in Wausau, quite a bit. And I'm not sure. I'm guessing that has to be phase one, where you've got to. I don't know if it involves actually tearing down some current space or not, or what.
Yeah, you know, Mike, if you started from a blank slate, okay, like property that was like greenfield, the idea would be to do something similar to what they've done in Plover. Not they necessarily, this developer, but what's been done in Plover and Rib Mountain, where you have, you know, the Hobby Lobby next to the pet store next to whatever, and you know, laid out like in a horizontal manner. Well, we already have a mall there to work around, and we've got a couple of other. We've got Kohl's, we've got Ashley, you know, who are a big part of it. But I can't always visualize this myself, but it's going to be some new construction. There's going to be some redevelopment, you know, renovation, remodeling. And when it's all done, you're going to see the best effort they can do to kind of create that type of development without really blowing up, so to speak, the entire property and starting from square one. So it'll be interesting to see it unfold as the development occurs. But you're going to see those main ones kind of try to be laid out as side by side as possible, given where they're starting from.
Okay. But again, the entrance to these stores will be where, you know, the back door was to the old stores in the mall. You'd walk in the mall and go in the store from the frontage, which was inside. And now it's going to be, you know, you're going to see like what Kohl's is. You're going to see, you know, facing the parking lot.
Right. And that really, we've talked about this before, I think. The mall idea is not very popular with a lot of people these days, especially younger people, but they've kind of fallen out of favor. I sometimes wonder if malls aren't going to come back into favor sometime, because where we live up here in the north part of the country, I mean, winter is how long? But for some reason they're not popular. This approach is more popular. And so, yeah, trying to lay them out more side by side as best they can, given where they're starting from, is a model that they're trying to create.
Okay. Anything else on that development agreement?
No, I just hope it'll be seen in a good light for our community. I think it will be. Again, I think people are very excited. I'm not a big shopper myself, but I know people who go to Hobby Lobby right now, and they go to Wausau simply to go to Hobby Lobby. And then you throw in the others and Planet Fitness as well, along with the retail shopping. I think it's going to do very well, and I think it's going to create a new level of interest and excitement in our community. I really do.
All right, and then there was another agenda item coming out of closed session. It says on the agenda, sale of city-owned property. Maybe just talk about what this is. What is the property? Who's the buyer? And some of the details.
Yeah, there's a company called H&S Manufacturing, and they're down on South Hume in the south part of our community. And they've been growing and doing well. And the city owns a parcel of land near them that they were hoping to buy part of as part of being able to expand their business. So as I recall, it's maybe in the neighborhood of 1 acre. It's not a large piece of property, but being able to acquire that will allow them to ultimately expand their business, create more tax base, you know, hopefully more jobs along with it. So the council did talk about it. What they're looking for is an offer to purchase agreement, and then also an early occupancy agreement for them to begin to go on the land and begin doing some work on the land. And the council was very favorable to both. It's a company that we want to see grow. Well, we want to see all of our companies grow, but a good small manufacturing firm. And so that was approved by the council last night.
All right. And again, working our way backwards on the agenda now, these were items that, again, were approved after a closed session, which is always at the end of the meeting. So kind of going back now to an agenda item that says presentation of candidates for an appointment to a 5-year term on the Marshfield Utilities Commission. So this was basically what, the council getting a list of candidates to consider in the future?
Yeah, well, and really by October 1st is when they want to have this person appointed. The Utilities Commission is a pretty important one. They deal with the electric and water rates, and they obviously were part of the planning, the big part of the planning for the new building that's been built next to Vanderhay Waters. They have 5 members on that commission, and so every year one of them is due. They have 5-year terms. So when we get into the late summer, we're always recruiting to see if we can find interest in that position. And that's even if the incumbent, if you will, wants to continue. And that is the case here. Nate Miller wants to continue being on the commission. He put his name in the hat, so to speak, along with 3 other people, Jennifer Trader, Dorothy Schnitzler, and Mary Jo Wheeler. I'm sorry for hesitating there. And they all had a chance last night to speak at the meeting, up to 5 minutes, to talk about themselves, their background, why do they think they'd be good for the commission? What do they have special qualifications, background, interest, or experience? And 3 of them did speak. Nate Mueller did make it clear that he would not be there. He had another commitment, I believe. So now what the council will do, they've got resumes, and they've got letters of interest, and they've got the comments made from the podium, Mike. So now they'll think about it, and in 2 weeks, on the 27th, the council will vote. This is the only appointment not made by the mayor. Most of our appointments are made by the mayor, subject to being ratified by the council. This one is simply a council vote. They'll have little pieces of paper, and they'll write down who they think that they'd like to see be the new commission member, and then the clerk will tally them. If it's a tie, we'll have a revote. Let's say 2 people tie at 4, then we'll have everybody revote again, and the people who voted for somebody else will presumably vote for one of the other 2 candidates, and we'll do that until we have someone selected to be on the commission effective October 1st.
Okay. And I guess I did go out of order technically, because I think they moved that one up to the beginning of the meeting. If you're listening to this and now you're going to go back to the meeting video or something and look for that at the end, it's not at the end. They moved it up.
Yeah, so I had intended to put that at the beginning, and normally we put items at the beginning, even if it would seem normal to have them at the end, whenever we expect to have people there to talk.
Yeah.
We don't want them sitting, I don't want to listen to every ordinance and every resolution we want to parade. So we did move them up to the after consent agenda.
No one needs to sit there all night and listen to the city administrator ramble on about budgets, right? Okay.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, which by the way,
we're going to do now.
Yeah, we're going to do now.
Yeah.
So we're going to make these guys listen to it.
Exactly.
So that was kind of the big topic of discussion on 2 fronts at the council meeting and there were 2, and I'll take the last one first, I guess. Preliminary report and discussion of issues and challenges related to 2023 city budget. And then this ties to the next thing we'll be talking about, which will be a specific budget, I guess, fund or item.
Correct.
But first of all, just give us the synopsis of what that preliminary report sounded like and what the discussion was in terms of next year's budget.
Yeah, sure, Mike. Every year we try to give the council a little bit of a briefing a month or so before the first meeting, when they talk about it, to get a sense of what does it look like, what's the playing field look like. And oftentimes it sounds like, well, it's going to be another tough year. And I think that the department heads have heard me say that for a long time. This one could be particularly tough, and we wanted them to know about it. We wanted to go through it. Last year, the general fund budget revenue and expenses was $23.5 million. This year, we've gotten all the projections on revenue. We've gotten all the budgets from the department heads, and the projection for the expenses is $24.4 million, and the revenue is $22.4 million. So the revenue is up $900,000, and the expenses are up $900,000 initially. This is premature now, of course,
okay.
And the revenues are down about $900,000 or so, $1 million. So the question is, well, a couple things. Why did the revenues go down? That's a little bit deceiving. Last year we used roughly $700,000 of general fund reserve to balance the budget, and that's not showing in there right now.
Okay.
And we've also got some special assessment revenue that we didn't know how to predict when we brought this forward the other night, and that's going to be a lot more than we had in there. We had, I think, like $60,000. We think at the end of the day it'll be closer to maybe even $400,000 when you look at all the money coming in from past years' payments on special assessments. So it's probably closer to. Well, we're not going to delve into that full amount of the general fund reserves. I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. So we start out with a $2 million gap. Let's put it that way. So what do? What are our options? Well, we talked about some of them. In fact, we even went into the idea of other revenue sources that we've discussed in the past that aren't really popular sometimes, but they're out there. Wheel tax, stormwater utility, transportation utility. There are even a few cities in Wisconsin that have a sales tax. Now, I think that's meant mainly for cities that have a lot of tourism focus. Could we try and offload costs from the general fund onto some other place, like street lighting or garbage collection? So we talked about some of those. We also acknowledge the fact that there's going to be a fair amount of budget cuts needed to make this picture work, and kind of reviewing what we think are the top priorities in the community. What are the things that we want to definitely protect and not see cut? So we kind of gave council a first look, or a first blush, if you will, at the picture.
Yeah, I think the term you used was significant challenges.
It
going into putting together a budget for next year.
It is.
Because there's so many things.
And here are some of them. The revenue from the state aids is pretty flat, maybe minor increases every year. Transportation aid, shared revenue. Inflation is 7 or 8% for us, the same way as it is for you and me at home. So that means the cost of gas and supplies and utilities, all that stuff is going up for the city. We've got other challenges as well. Health insurance costs, continue to go up. Contracting for recycling and other services, we're kind of beholden to the fact we have to have them. So the cost of those services is going to go up through no fault of ours. We have to keep signing on for another year of some of the services that we contract for. So that makes a very difficult starting point. And I wanted them to know that.
Yeah. There are other challenges, and I think one of them is this, and maybe you mentioned it, levy limit?
Yeah.
Where now, maybe explain this a little bit, because cities in Wisconsin can only go so far. Because I'm sitting there thinking, I'm watching the discussion going, okay, wait a minute. Because I wrote down another term you said. You said there is no silver bullet for fixing
it.
all this. Well, and I'm going, well, yes, there is. Just raise our taxes. Is that, because you started out by saying, what got us here partly is there has been little or no tax increase over the past decade. So the council, by not doing that, but no tax increase means here we are a decade later. Now we have this problem.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of a council problem.
Well, yeah.
It's one of the factors. Let's just say that. It's not the factor, but it's one of the factors. They have, resisted tax increases. Isn't that an easy fix? Just say, look, we got to make up for all this, and here's a big one coming at you. I think we just did one not too long ago.
Yeah, we did.
Couldn't you just say, here it is, folks. You want the same level of service? Here's the number. Your taxes are going up by this number. Again, never popular, but isn't that the fix? Isn't that the easy way out?
I'm going to try and make this as simple and understandable as I can. Okay.
And answer the question.
If we need a whiteboard behind me, we'll have to quick order one.
And can they even do that? And so when you ask, when you answer the question about levy limits, I know there's a lot there, but
there is. Levy limits is basically the state telling you that for the most part, except for one exception with debt, but for the most part, you can only levy from the taxpayers the same amount of money you did last year, plus a factor for the new construction that you have to support. So you have new building, that means you have to have new road maintenance for the street that goes to that building, and maybe another police officer someday for the fact that you need to take care of that area of town, whatever. Last year, I think our net new construction was like 3.4%. This year it's 0.55%, which means net new construction, net new building that we need to take care of is pretty minimal. So in other words, what they say is, okay, let's say I'll make up a number. Let's say you levied $10 million from your taxpayers last year. You can only levy $10 million again this year plus 0.55% over that. That's minimal when you consider 7% inflation and all the things we just talked about. The thing that got us by in the past, that hurt us and got us by, first of all, you're right about the fact we held taxes for many years. Not necessarily flat, but oftentimes 0.25% to 0.5%, pretty small compared to the CPI. And I was part of that. I mean, I tried to find out what they were willing to entertain. They wanted to keep it as low as possible. We found a way to do it. As it turned out, we were using some monies in some cases we shouldn't have, and we dealt with that in 2019. But as a result of that, we were able to capture some old levy space that we never used. In other words, we could have gone this high back in 2016. We didn't. We could have gone that high in 2017, but we didn't. So we were able to go back with help from the state of Wisconsin and our financial advisor and recapture that. So for the last couple of years, including the big one we had with 7% tax increase, we were able to do that because we had unused levy capacity from past years. We've now run that out basically. We're now back up to where we probably would have been basically if we'd had small increases along the way. So what we're stuck with, Mike, is when someone says, just increase the taxes, we really can't do much of anything. The levy says we can only go levy limit says we only can go that high legally. So it's not a matter of buck up everybody and fork it out. It's a matter of we have to cut expenses or find other revenues to make up that gap. Because levying property taxes beyond this amount right here cannot actually happen.
Beyond, other than adding net new construction.
Right.
Like you said, so you put a new building up or something, you have some new development, you can use that new develop, the money generated, property taxes, I guess you could say, generated by that new development.
Right.
That's what I think I grabbed from the discussion was that's only $60,000.
Correct. Plus there was another 90,000 that we're able to apply from another reason. It had to do with a refund that we made from a previous year. So we can increase the amount we capture from the public, from the taxpayers, by 150,000. Which, when you consider that we're talking about a $23.5 million budget, 150,000 in additional tax revenue is not a lot.
Yeah, I mean you're right.
So we're left with. That's why we talk about alternative revenues. That's why we talk about, are there expense cuts possible? Let me go back to the general fund if I can for a minute.
Yeah.
We've been trying to wean ourselves out of using the general fund reserves to balance the budget. Now, just because we balanced the budget last year with about $750,000 in our savings account, if you will, doesn't mean we spend it all. A lot of years we've used some general fund, and then it's turned out it was a good year. We didn't spend what we thought. Maybe we had a surplus of 1 or 2%. And the amount we needed at the end of the day to settle up, if you will, from the general fund turned out to be a lot less than we'd budgeted. But what we're trying to do is budget less from the general fund to meet that gap, because Moody's, the people who do our rating for bonds, has been watching this very closely. They're favorable to what we've done the last 3 years to try and get out of our problem with the TIF districts. And they actually took the negative outlook off of our bond rating. In other words, they're saying, look, we don't think that if you're going any direction now, you're going down. You're kind of here, and hopefully you'll go back up again. But if we continue to balance the annual budget using hundreds of thousands of dollars of the general fund, the savings account, and are never making progress toward getting out of that predicament, they're going to look at us and say, you know what, we might be wrong. Maybe you are going to go the other direction, because you're tapping into your reserves to balance the budget in a way that we can't really support. So I think my long way of saying this is that I don't think you're going to see us use anywhere near $750,000 to balance this budget. We can't do that. That's not responsible. But it probably won't be zero either. We'll probably try to wean ourselves over a period of, 2, 3, 4 years out of that world to get us to where we're not using those anymore. But again, how much we can cut from these various budget mics and how much other revenue we can find is going to determine whether we have to, and to what degree we might have to tap in to general fund reserves.
There is another way.
Okay.
And I heard Jennifer, is it Selinsky?
Correct.
Our new finance director. Now she's from, where is she from?
Well, originally from Wisconsin, but has been in Colorado for the last 7 years until last fall.
I can tell. She spent some time in other parts of the country, because at least on 3 occasions during the council meeting, she used a word that is not very popular around here, especially when it comes to raising taxes, and that's referendum.
Yeah.
Now in Colorado, they have referendums for everything, including legalizing marijuana. So that tells you, some of the background. But she mentioned referendum on a number of occasions, going, unless you do a referendum, here's the picture. And I'm going, we don't talk like that around here. We don't say referendum hardly ever. Now the general public might say, well, why wasn't there, you guys decided to build a new aquatic center or a new whatever. Why wasn't there a referendum on that? Because we did have a referendum for a new fire station.
Right.
Although that was, probably not, that was not necessary anyway. But my point is this. We could, as citizens, have a referendum. We could decide, right, to tax ourselves more.
Yep, correct.
It would have to be through a referendum. What is that? You just pick some number and say, "Here's what we're." How does that? If that were to happen, which it can't anymore this year because we're beyond
past that date, but looking to 2024 because that'll be another tough year.
Yeah, I mean, how would that work?
Well, first of all, let's step back in time. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, probably when you and I used to be talking in the old studio, when we had a referendum that the council put out there for major street work. You remember that?
Yeah, well, a summer referendum where nobody was around to vote.
I know, you're right. But the idea was we would tax ourselves and raise enough money to do, I think, 8 or 9 major portions of streets that probably wouldn't happen otherwise.
Right.
And it got voted down by like a 2-to-1 margin. I think it was like 65 to 35%. Well, the theory is that this would be for operations. This would be our way of saying we need this money to operate, and so we were asking you to give us another, whatever it would take to levy, how much on their tax bill to get to another million or whatever it is, some number. I don't think many Wisconsin cities and villages have been very successful with that.
Okay.
Now, school districts have had a little bit more success. I think our school district has done it more than once.
Yep.
And I'm not sure why they've been more successful. Maybe it's because we're talking about kids and education and stuff. But very few success stories on referendums have occurred in communities across Wisconsin. So it is a possibility. It's not one that is oftentimes viewed favorably. I think most of the public says, look, rein in your spending or something. But I got to be honest and say that the state of Wisconsin puts us in a tough bind. Not only do they not increase the amount that they give us in aid, but then they tie our hands and say, look, not only that, but you can't increase your levy by more than this. So it's like, okay, we can't raise taxes and we can't, you're not giving us more assistance, and how do we do this?
And oh, by the way, the GDP just went through the roof.
Correct.
Inflation is 7 to 8%. Everything costs more, and that just ate up anything that those revenue sources would cover and more.
Well, right, and I don't mean to whine. I know that the folks down in Madison have their own things that they deal with.
Right.
But my idea is that maybe Point wants a different tax rate than we do. Maybe they want more services or they want fewer services, and we could have a different. So what the state is saying, fine, that's great. You just have to have a referendum, and everybody knows how hard it is to get people to vote to increase their own taxes. So
right.
am I saying that that's wrong? No, but I'm saying that that's very difficult to accomplish in real life.
Well, and not only that, but we don't. Going back to what would the number be? Would the council say, here's what it would take? Our budget deficit is this, okay?
Right.
You mentioned we just had a 7% tax increase
Correct.
not too long
We did,
ago.
a couple of years ago. Yeah.
What if the council said, boy, here's what it would take. It would take a 5 or 6 or another 7% increase to get this straightened out again.
Right.
And to get us in a better position. Is it the council that comes up with the number? If this were to go to referendum, it's not like you go to referendum and say, okay, here's your referendum question, fill in the blank. How much would you like to increase your taxes by? It would be a set number by the council, correct?
It would. It would be based upon the finance director and me, saying, look, if you go 5%, here's what you're going to raise. If you go 4%, here's what you're going to raise, and then they'd have an idea whether or not they're pulling in enough to fill the gap.
Yeah.
But it would be a numerical thing put in the referendum itself.
Okay. But okay.
And truthfully, the fact of the matter is that I'm a fiscal conservative. I am. I want people to know that if they're tuned in right now. I'm not trying to say, you know what, I'd like to raise people's taxes by 20% and put this all to bed. But truthfully, if inflation is truly 7 or 8%, which it is, and you're only allowed to levy this much more than you did last year, what do they expect us to do? There ought to be a consumer price index component in the formula. Because, I get it. Maybe levy limits work if inflation is 1%. But if it's, 8%, it doesn't work. You can't, how do you do that?
Yeah.
When you have to buy the same supplies and equipment and gas and utility that everybody else is trying to do at home and not making it.
Yeah, and I come sort of from it's sort of like with the gas price. Well, what's the gas price today? Gee, should I fill up today? Should I fill up tomorrow?
Yeah.
No, you should have filled up yesterday. Well, what's the gas price? What's it going to be? Should I wait? And I'm more of a, well, look, it's something you need anyway.
Right.
You got to pay for it. Just go get it.
Yep.
So you need all these services on the list, right? The city has all these wonderful services. Comes with a price. Let's just, that's what the price is in 2023. Let's just pay it.
Yeah, and I want to come full circle and make it clear that I'm not really whining. I don't want to whine about anything, really. I mean, the fact of the matter is Madison has its own issues to deal with. And so talking about what goes on at the state, talking about our past doesn't help us either.
Right.
I mean, we can talk about how we could have had a higher tax rate or made some different decisions back in 2015 or whatever. That's not going to get us out of the place we're at right now. So we need to buck up. One of the things you're going to see us do, I think, next year, Mike, and probably very close to the first of the year, is start getting surveys out to our public. Again, we have new software, a new product we're going to use, to survey our citizens and say, hey, look, what are the most important things to you? We're not telling you we're going to cut for 2024, but if we need to protect something or if we have to cut something, what are the most important programs and services to you? Because it may come down to the fact that someday it's like, well, we have to trim back in this area. At least the public is telling us that they're comfortable with that. They don't want us to touch these things, okay, so we did
Right.
it. Eventually, the public is going to become part of the debate in a more meaningful way as well. That's what has to happen in hard times.
Yeah, okay. By the way, no disrespect to Jennifer. She is, I tell you, no matter what her background is, just listening to her present at a council meeting, you can tell she knows her stuff when it comes to being a finance director, because it just comes off the top of her head. She doesn't have to fumble around with, let me see what this policy is. I mean, she just knows how this stuff works. So she was a really good addition, I think, because she has a lot of great experience as a
She does.
past, right? I mean,
Correct.
she was a past.
A lot of financial experience.
Yeah.
And Pat worked in Fort Collins, Colorado as and I forget her title there now, but a very significant accounting position.
Okay.
And, I oftentimes say what great staff we have at City Hall, and I really do mean that. But I will say right now, you're right. Jennifer's been a wonderful addition. She came on as our accounting manager, number 2 in the department, and within 60 days, Ron Allman resigned, and we all looked at her like,
Right.
could you be the interim? Could you be the interim? And then after that, would you be interested in being the main person? And so this is really her first budget, and she's just doing a wonderful job for us. And Jordan Munger, who took the job of accounting manager after Jennifer was bumped up, has also been a new employee coming to us from the clinic, and he's done a great job as well.
Okay. Yeah, she knows. You can tell. She's just, again, right off the top of her head.
Oh, wonderful.
So speaking of screwed up budgets here, so there was another item before this that was discussed, as we keep kind of going backwards through the meeting.
Right.
Request to hold a series of 3 special council meetings to address the EMS fund issue, and then to schedule those meetings, which the council did. Just maybe kind of take us through that discussion, because that's a whole nother, that's a budget within a budget issue that we talked about, I think, a couple of times on this program, where the council has talked about, okay, what's this issue now, where we had the fiasco a couple of years ago with the 1 point whatever million, with the whole TIF district funding, that,
correct,
whatever.
correct.
Now here's another one that nobody seemed to catch, EMS fund issue. And now you're going to have a series of meetings to, I guess, straighten this out, right?
Yeah, that is the vision of Ed Wagner, our council president, and where he wants to take this. And this all came out of a conversation we had back on August 2nd with the Fire and Police Commission and the council together. Just a little background, if I can give it for people. The city runs an ambulance service. It's part of the Fire and Rescue Department. They're all one department out there on 4th. And the issue is, first of all, how do we treat it? And we've been treating it as what's called an enterprise fund, which means we kind of treat it like it's a business. Kind of like wastewater. It kind of stands by itself. So that's part of the deal, and we've actually allocated some charges to them based upon the services they get from other city departments, so that plays into this as well. But the really bigger issue that we've come across in the last couple of years, and again, Jennifer, with help from Jordan, the 2 of them together have done a great job of kind of flushing this out. But we outsource our ambulance billing to a company called LifeQuest in Wautoma. They do the ambulance billing and collections for a lot of cities and villages across Wisconsin. So every year we get a report from them. Here's how much we've billed, how much we've collected. But what we've been doing is showing on our balance sheet, if you will, the amount still to be collected at full value. And somehow it was never caught and dealt with the fact that after a few years, some of those are not likely to be collected. I mean, you have Medicare and Medicaid, which makes up 70% of our billing. Well, oftentimes Medicare and Medicaid, you get what you get, and then you can keep sending a bill every day for the rest of your life. You're probably not going to get any more from those particular patients. So after a couple of years, some of the collection likelihood starts to drop off. So we find ourselves in a position where we've been overestimating the amount that we were still going to receive. So as a result, we find ourselves where we're at. So I think Mr. Wagner's vision is to have 3 meetings like this. The first meeting, how do we rectify the fact that we have a shortfall because of that? Number 2, how do we put things on the right footing for a long-term sustainable model for our ambulance, given the fact that Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement rates are not likely to go up? The federal government is not talking about this while you and I are sitting here. And then number 3, to improve council and staff relations. There's some frustration with how this came about. Why we didn't tell them earlier. I think I've tried to explain that when we first found out something was wrong, we didn't know exactly what it was, so we spent some time at staff level kind of baking that before we came to the council, and they feel like we should have brought it to them earlier. So talking about how we can have a a tighter working relationship between the council and staff, I think is his view for part 3. These are 3 separate meetings.
Yep.
And but I will say this, Mike, before you ask any more questions. The ambulance services run by cities and villages across Wisconsin are all struggling with this. And maybe not the part about the amount of accounts receivable that they're going to get paid for, but the part about the increase in cost and the flat reimbursement from their primary customers. Yeah. You could raise the ambulance rates from 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000. You're only talking about a small percentage of your customers. So how does that work as a business model? I mean,
especially if you're not going to get it half the time anyway. Correct.
Yeah, if you were selling a product for $15 at a store that you just made up, and you knew that only 30% of the people were ever going to pay $15, the others were going to get it for $4 or $5, that's a tough model to overcome. And that's why the state is trying to figure out ways to help local EMS operations as well through grants and other programs, because they see the difficulty that people are having trying to run these.
And some are going to get it for free.
Correct.
Sometimes there are people who pay nothing ever.
Right.
And get away with it.
Right.
Because what are you going to do?
And that brought up the idea, I think one of the council members said it at the meeting, well, maybe we look at privatizing. Yeah. Well, you know, that sounds great, but you'd have to pay a Gold Cross or somebody to come here and provide the service, and then they're still going to bill the customers. And will the level of service be what you want? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. So that's not just like what I called the other night, a silver bullet.
Yeah, right.
It's not.
Yeah, Alderman Wagner had a good quote, and when he was talking about the first issue, which is how do we deal with this fund deficit,
right?
EMS fund deficit. And he said, I didn't know we were, but this is maybe the issue, or one of the big, well, it's one of the big ones. I did not know we were paying debt service on the fire station from the EMS fund. So, right, but part of that goes to the new fire station, and that was, I think, a surprise to most.
And one of the things that might come out of this is putting the 2 operations together in the general fund.
Yeah.
Maybe incorporating the ambulance into the general fund. But again, the premise for that was the same thing as the premise for charging the EMS enterprise fund for a little bit of my time, a little bit of the finance director's time, because we were treating them like a business, and a business would need to pay for an HR assistant. They'd have to pay for a finance, people to help them. So to charge a small percentage of our time to them seemed reasonable.
Right.
And because the fire trucks take up part of the building and the ambulances take up the other part of the building, the idea that there's some percentage that we charge to the ambulance service seemed to make sense. But if you look back and you say, well, we put them in an awful bind, all the costs that they had to overcome they really weren't directly ones that they controlled. True. So that's part of how do we restructure this to be long-term sustainable.
Yeah, in other words, one of the issues, and I think they looked at several models, and the Toma and several others.
Beloit and others.
Okay,
yeah.
Beloit. And one of the issues was, and I think they do this in Toma, part of that model, and it could be Toma, it could be one of the other ones they mentioned, but they charge their municipality.
They do.
Because they're one of the customers. They look at their municipality as a customer, because if you're going to, again, run this like a business, well, we have customers, the city is doing stuff for us. Okay, well, we're going to charge them to do, right? I mean, so we don't do that here. The city is not a customer of the EMS fund,
correct.
Which is how some others do it.
And now for irony, 13 towns and the village of Hewitt are. They have a contract with us every year, and they pay for that service, and our community doesn't pay. Okay. And I think the thought was, well, they are us. Well, they are us, except we've decided that they're a business. So we've kind of, at that point, commingled it a little bit. So what I would say to people who are tuned in right now, Mike, and hearing us, don't panic. I mean, I think we'll work this out. We've had the topic of, are they a business? Are they not a business? What do they have to pay for? What do they not have to pay for? And then, of course, the bigger issue of the fact that we have a lot of our customers that we never collect anywhere near full value from. How do we get this back to a place where we can be sustainable? And it's going to be a challenge because of the Medicare and Medicaid, if I could say it right, Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement rate being flat, quite frankly, over the years. Yeah. And I don't know how that ultimately can play out, but we'll find a way to work this out and move forward.
It's sort of like, the state issue with the funding. Yeah. why is the state not paying, why are the state aides not keeping up with anything?
They're not.
And why? It's a structural issue. It's sort of like state, 2/3 funding for schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's that's just a thing on paper. That's not happening.
No, not at all.
In the actual budget world, in the actual money that's being sent out there, ask any school administrator or school board member anywhere in the state. 2/3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds good, but they don't pay. That's not what they get.
No.
So that's
no.
a structural issue you're right. When you said
is.
the other night at the council meeting, maybe we need to talk to our legislators and say, look, you got to start lobbying for, you got to do business a better way at the state level and live up to these state aids and so on and so forth. Because when it comes to municipalities, that's where the big problem lies, at the state level.
Yeah, and there's a big problem, it has been for many years, of the whole state and federal, of the state and local funding,
Yeah.
And that needs to be corrected, but nobody knows how to do it.
Right.
And part of the thing is there'll be winners and there'll be losers. So if they redo the way the funding goes and we win and Milwaukee loses, I don't know if that's going to play very well.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is if Milwaukee loses, the legislator loses the polls the next time, so he or she doesn't want to pass this because then they lose their job as a legislator. And
right.
So now this is why this stuff never goes anywhere,
right.
because people are going to lose their jobs as lawmakers and they want to keep getting reelected.
Right. But right now what I would settle for, for Madison is to say, look, levy limits, they tie our hands, but at least that's okay to some degree when the inflation rate is 1.5%. It doesn't work. I mean, how can they not adjust it when they look at this?
Yeah.
How can, including the state? The state's costs are going up by 8% too. And again, I sound like I'm whining. They've got their problems. They probably can tell me that I've got problems I need to fix, and they're right. But the reality is that the levy limits do not work very well in an environment where we have high inflation.
Yeah.
They just don't.
Yeah, and really the other major issue here too is, and you mentioned the second meeting of these three meetings.
Yeah.
Will be, which model do we want to use?
Right.
And as Alderman Wagner said at the meeting the other night, this will be a long-term policy decision.
Yeah.
And that's really the other big issue right here is, okay, once we fix this deficit, now let's set this up for the future so that we don't have this deficit anymore and we're doing this right. And I wrote down another quote he had at the meeting the other night. He said, if we can come up with a way of filling that hole without having a huge impact on the taxpayers by the time we get the budget out, I'll be very happy. And I think all of us will be very happy too, because then it means that we will have fixed this thing going forward. This will not be an issue anymore.
Right, true. But let me tell you how difficult that is, because if we do talk about having the ambulance funded into the general fund, now that money that we have been charging as overhead, we can't. I mean, so in other words, money that we've been taking from the EMS fund for the general fund will stop. What about the fact that we've never paid as a customer the same way the townships have? Suddenly we'll have to pay as a customer. So the general fund is going to face a hit that's going to make us worse than a $2 million starting point. So it's a very complicated issue, and there's a lot riding on it. And honestly, from what I hear, the fire department is a little bit uneasy, as I understand it. We're trying to calm the waters and say, hey, look, hang in there. But they're looking at this and saying, what's it going to look like when it shakes out? We're trying to tell them to rest assured we're going to have good fire and EMS service. We want you to be part of it. But we don't have a way to point to yet on how all this is going to come together. Whew. But we're committed to it. I mean, police and fire are the most important things any community does. Yep. So we'll definitely protect those operations and make sure that they're viable. But it's going to be a challenge. It is. It will be a challenge.
Yeah, there's some big issues here.
There are.
Oh, man. So you want to be an alderman, huh?
Yeah.
Well, here's
Good
what
luck.
you're going to deal with.
Good luck.
No, and we mentioned, okay, so then I think, in those meetings, by the way, the first one is on September 20th?
Yeah, correct. And they really didn't go beyond that yet.
Okay.
They didn't go beyond that yet. They just set the first one. Two will follow after that.
Okay.
But I think they want them to follow fairly quickly because we are moving into the budget discussions.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. All right, so the only other thing I was going to bring up was at the very beginning of the meeting. This is a feel-good thing, no budget deficits, no, bad policies, about EMS funds or anything. So now that that's done, right, we'll do the fun thing. It was at the beginning of the meeting. And this had to do with, speaking of our state legislature, And a couple of lawmakers came to the meeting to do a proclamation, right?
Yeah, they did. It was kind of cool. John Spiros and Donna Rosar from the state legislature were there, and we're celebrating the 150th anniversary of our community. And they had a proclamation. They had a nice plaque to go with it that we can put on the wall that really is commending the city for the 150 years and just celebrating. And it was kind of cool. She presented it then to the mayor after reading it. Donna did. And it's exciting, and I guess I'm not even sure all the things that are going on at this point. I should know more than I do, but to pause and say this has been a community, for 150 years, and we look forward to a lot of good years to come.
Yeah, it was really especially neat to see Alderman Wagner there. He was at that first council meeting, and so to have him there was really.
Mike Fire was the one who got picked on.
That's right.
Mike Fire did. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mike Fire.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to pick on Ed. So.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. Actually, Mike and Ed, I think he's been a council member for
20 plus years.
20 plus years.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
yeah.
Speaks well of him. But it was a fun thing to celebrate.
Yeah, really.
And we're glad they
we're
came.
having fun celebrating it in all kinds of ways this year in Marshfield.
Yeah, a lot going on.
It's really been a lot of fun. But that was the other one thing I wanted to mention from the meeting. I had nothing else to.
And one of the things, if you notice our meetings, we always like to start it with positive because we have some tough issues. But
yeah.
That, and then two new employees, Elena Ratch and Brian Kruger. Elena's in the accounting department, and Brian's with our parks department. And then David Bueller, our senior GIS coordinator, he was given a big special award, a national award for achievement in GIS. So we'd like to celebrate the good things going on, even as we have to talk about some of the challenges.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very good. Well, thanks, Steve, again, for the opportunity to come in and talk about some of these issues facing the council. Again, I kind of joked, so you wanted to be an alderman.
Yeah.
Man, I tell you, I've been covering council meetings for, a long time, and, aside from some of those really, tough battles they had in the, mid to late 90s when, all you have to do is say hotel conference center around here and you go, whoa, those were some, beyond some of those, boy, it seems that in the last few years there have really been some really tough council meetings and some tough issues and some tough pills to swallow here. So it's not been easy.
It's not been easy or pretty, and the TIF transfer thing that we started off 2019 with was really the beginning of a number of things. Certainly went through with the police chief and the former mayor and a lot of other things right up until now. Former municipal court clerk, the EMS fund, but we continue to work through them. It's funny, if you're on the council, sometimes you go through like 3 or 4 meetings where it's just, hey, we'll go home at 7:30 and it's all good, but then you have times where you really earn your money and the fact that you've been entrusted to help make this a better community.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, well, thanks.
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate having you here as always, and thank you for tuning in to the post-council meeting news conference, which we do again every time after the regular meetings of the Common Council. The next one, which will be on Tuesday, the 27th of September. You're welcome to attend. It'll start at 6 o'clock. And also, as we mentioned here, there'll be a special council meeting on Tuesday, September 20th at 6 o'clock to talk about the EMS fund issue that we've been discussing here today. So on behalf of Mike Warren from Hub City Times, I'm Steve Barg, City Administrator, saying thank you for watching and have a great day.